Not to mention, women also have to worry about getting pregnant and whatnot. Then they'll have to either abort the fetus and get shamed as a baby killer, or they have to raise a kid that they didn't even want.
Of course, they also have the additional options of the morning after pill, which you would assume that they'd be given when they go to the hospital after the rape. But if they do choose to have the child, they can also take advantage of the fact that women have the right to parental abandonment. As I mentioned earlier, they can leave their children at any fire station or hospital thanks to the Baby Moses laws. Of course, if an underage boy is raped by an adult woman and that adult woman becomes pregnant, the underage boy is still responsible for paying child support to his rapist. Do you think that's okay?
Another thing they like to bring up is the minuscule amount of men's shelters compared to all the women's shelters. You know, it just dawned on me. Men's shelters are actually fucking everywhere. Seriously, look around you. They're everywhere. If they mean specifically for rape and abuse, well, again, women suffer from it more, so...
Oh, I see. So women suffer from it more, therefore there should be no men's shelters? I assume when you say men's shelters, you're talking about domestic violence. So the feminist statistics on domestic violence are obviously biased and one-sided. But let's just, for argument's sake, suggest that they're real. Let's actually suggest that the feminist statistics on male victims of domestic violence are in fact accurate. If this was in fact the case, the percentage of shelters for men would still not be proportionate to the number of men who are victims. And considering these shelters tend to get their funding from the government, that would be discrimination, wouldn't it? And when we look at something like the homeless, where the vast majority of the people who are homeless are male, yet women get special services? It's the exact opposite of what he's saying here. We have the minority getting special services based on gender. So the whole argument of more services for those who have greater victimhood is actually a bullshit argument when you look at it.
Only makes sense that more women's shelters for abuse and rape would exist. You wouldn't barge into a seminar about car crashes being the #1 killer of teenagers and scream, "People die in plane crashes too!" Because not only is it insensitive, but because plane crashes don't happen all that much as opposed to car crashes.
What an incredibly moronic analogy. For this analogy to be correct, people would not give a shit about plane crashes. In fact, there would be no safety standards on planes, and terrorists would be able to board planes at any point with a bomb and blow up the planes without people giving two shits. And if that was in fact the case, then yes, it would definitely be appropriate for people to say, what about the fucking plane crashes? Fucking hell.
MRAs like to say that men are usually told to suck it up or deal with it when they're abused, yet they'll try and justify when a woman is raped with the classic, "Hey, she was asking for it" line.
So it's a common thing for MRAs to say that, is it? It's more common amongst MRAs than any other group, is your argument. Yet you give no fucking evidence whatsoever, no citations, no examples. You're a fucking joke, mate.
Fine. Well then, MRAs, it ain't so cool when it's you now, is it? Which brings us to custody battles. Oh, I cannot wait for this. MRAs love throwing this one around. Like, they absolutely worship this one. So, misandry must exist since men hardly win full custody of their kids. Well, no, it doesn't. First, let's dive on the whole notion that women are to raise the kids, something MRAs are very pleased with subjecting women to forever.
So here we have an example of yet another straw man, where he claims that, MRAs want women at home raising the kids while, the man goes off and does man stuff, I guess, which is absolute fucking bullshit. Our stance is actually shared parenting, 50-50 parenting, so it's fucking ludicrous to suggest that we want to go back to the 1950s, you fucking moron. But what is even funnier about this is that the feminist organisation now does actually want to keep those patriarchal roles and have mothers only raising their kids, because apparently that's the mother's role according to them. It's something fathers can't do. You know those gender stereotypes that feminists claim to be against? Well, fucking now is fully in favour of them. They've been supporting him for well over a decade, trying to prevent fathers from getting custody. You fucking moron.
But with that in mind, you can't bitch at how misandry is running rampant when you yourselves have agreed that women are supposed to raise the kids, and that is their only place in life.
Wow, what a fucking lying piece of shit. Come on, mate, name the MRAs who are saying this. Fucking name them. I dare you, you lying fucking piece of shit.
Which is obviously a lie. A lot of these morons like to say that the father should win full custody since he goes to work. That's bullshit. You can be as rich as you like, and if you're a shit dad to your kids, better kiss them goodbye because they're going with mommy.
So here we have the perfect example of a double standard. He says if the guy is shit, he'll lose his kids, but at no point does he even consider that the mother might be shit. It's a requirement, a standard placed on fathers, which isn't placed on mothers.
Also, where the kids live is usually dependent on what they want. So if more kids want to live with mom than dad, then dad must have done fucked up, didn't he? The worst statistic is that women will win 86% of custody battles. Not true. It's actually 54%. That's still a lot, I know, but not nearly as much as that disgusting exaggeration that MRAs came up with.
Now, would you be surprised if I told you that Slothboy doesn't give us a citation for this statistic? I don't think you would. I mean, I wasn't the least bit surprised that we got no citation for the statistic. So I can't actually check it out. I can't see if it's legit. I can't see if it's a regional statistic. I can't see if there's any reasons why it may have been misrepresented, or if there's any factors which aren't taken into account. There's no way I can check any of these things. I'm just meant to take him at his word, and considering so far how incredibly bad he has been with reality, I'm not really willing to do that. He does, however, give us a link to an article about mothers losing custody, and there are some interesting things in there, so I think it's only right that we have a quick look at it.
Why more and more women are losing custody battles over their children. Like millions of women of her generation, Karen Martin dared to believe that women really could have it all. A high-flying creative director at a London advertising agency, she got married, had 2 children, and while her husband, Mark, played the house husband, she was the family breadwinner. For a while, this very modern arrangement appeared to be working out perfectly. Then her husband had a fling with a single mother he met at a playgroup, and Karen threw him out. What followed was a traumatic court battle which saw a judge hand custody of her 8-year-old son and 6-year-old daughter to their father, who lives on benefits in a council house. To add insult to injury, the judge ordered Karen to pay maintenance to her former husband.
Now, we've all heard this exact same scenario numerous times, only with the genders flipped, where the male is the breadwinner and the mother is the main caregiver, and the mother gets custody and the father's separated from his kids, and often the single mother is living on benefits or in a council flat or whatever. That's been the normal story for 40 or 50 years now, but suddenly it's a big issue because it's now happening to women. Now, I'm not the type of person to say, well, it's been happening to men for 40 years, so now it deserves to happen to women. That's bullshit. That's a bullshit argument. And my stance on custody is pretty bloody simple. The default should be 50-50 custody. Now, that would help men who are in that situation, and it would help mothers like this one. Now, if a parent decides that they want less time with their child because of their career, or maybe they've got another family or whatever, then that can be negotiated down. But the starting point should be 50-50 custody. Whereas Slothboy here, his starting point would be Give it to the mother, and who gives two shits about the father? Fuck the father, right, Slothboy? But there's a couple of other examples in the article, so let's have a look at them.
Though Mark had not returned to work and was living with his parents in Gloucestershire, the judge ruled it was a more favourable environment for the children than living with a career mother, says Karen. He lives in a council house on benefits. I'm speechless that the courts feel this is a better environment for my children to be raised in than living with a parent who has a strong work ethic and a lovely home.
So once again, if the genders were reversed and Mark was in fact a woman who had left her husband and was now living with her parents, with her children, this would not be seen as an issue. Or if she was living in a council house on benefits, it would not be seen as an issue. But when a father's in this position, he's somehow criticised as being a bad role model. Let's look at one more part from the article before moving on.
At first, Jane saw Dominic at weekends. But she claims her former husband turned her son against her. He spent so much money on him, buying him the latest PlayStation and a puppy. Dominic became resentful when I wouldn't buy him things. One weekend, in 1998, he asked me to buy him computer games. When I refused, he phoned his dad and asked to go home. That was the last time I saw him. I wrote countless letters to him that went unanswered. It was as if he had died. A decade has passed since then and Dominic is now 23. Jane, ironically, hasn't been able to work for 5 years due to the stress of losing her son. But if women are only suffering what divorced fathers have experienced for decades, counselor and author Sarah Hart points out that the stigma attached to women living apart from their children is far worse than it is for men.
So I feel a great deal of sorrow for Jane, the woman mentioned in the article. Losing her child like that must have been totally devastating to her. And I can understand something like that really affecting your life, even though I personally don't have children. But this exact same thing I've actually seen in friends of mine who happen to be male and are separated from their children. It's a very common thing for men. It has been common for men for 40 years now. And what Slothboy and this article seem to ignore is the fact that the rate of male suicide skyrockets after a divorce. I know I've said it many times before, but during a divorce, a wife loses her husband, but a husband not only loses his wife, but more often than not, his entire family. And you can see the effect this has just on the fact that the suicide rate in men rises so dramatically. Do you honestly think that's just some kind of weird coincidence? So yeah, there's bullshit that it affects women more, therefore it only matters when it happens to women, is fucking bullshit, and to be honest, it's fucking offensive. And the fact that it only seems to be a concern to so many people when it happens to women, and they seem to be just uncaring or unaware of the effect that it has on men, I think it really speaks volumes about what type of society that we're living in. But back to Slothboy.
In fact, women are actually losing custody battles a lot more in recent years. And statistics show that a woman losing her child is a lot more traumatic than it is for a man to, which is understandable. Most women endure years of counseling to cope with not being with their kids.
Yeah, but men just kill themselves, right? So, not really an issue in your book?